Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be discussing what is currently my favorite sci-fi book of all time. Yes, my absolute favorite today. And no, it's not Dune. No, it's not Foundation, as much as I love those series. No, it's not Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep or so many other great sci-fi novels. I love all of those, but for some reason there's one novel that bubbles to the top as my absolute favorite, at least at this point in my life, and that is Solaris by Stanisław Lem. This was published in 1961, at least in Polish it was, and it runs approximately 200 and, well, my copy is 214 pages long, but it depends on your copy. It can go anywhere from 200 to 240 pages. Now, this is one of the deepest works of sci-fi that I've ever come across in my life. I think about it almost daily, and it has a film adaptation that's one of my favorite films of all time, so I can't wait to talk about that today as well. I'll obviously provide you guys with a detailed summary, spoiler-free, of what this book is about. Then we'll go over some recommended films. We'll go over some recommended books that I would branch off to after reading this one, some similar books. And yeah, but before we get into all of that, I want to share with you guys a couple words on the author himself. Stanisław Lem was a Polish science fiction author, philosopher, and satirist, widely considered one of the most intelligent and original minds in speculative fiction. Born in Lwow, then Poland, now Ukraine, Lem survived Nazi occupation and Soviet control, later becoming a medical student and polymath whose works blended science, metaphysics, and existential psychology. Fluent in several disciplines, Lem used science fiction not to predict the future, but to explore the limits of human understanding, consciousness, and the alien. He is essential reading for anyone interested in the philosophical potential of science fiction, where questions matter more than answers. So I apologize to all my Polish viewers for butchering Stanisław's name or where he's from. I tend to butcher names on this channel quite often, so I apologize. But Stanisław Lem is one of those science fiction authors who I can't wait to dive into more of his work. So if there's any Polish viewers out there or any Lem fans, definitely let me know which work I should pick up next, because currently I've only read Solaris, but I was deeply, deeply moved by it. And it's, like I said, I think about it often. I think about the ocean, and I think about just so much about this novel. It perplexes me and confuses me. I'm still grappling with it to this day. So I'm going to give you guys a engaging summary of what this book is actually about without spoiling it. This is spoiler free. I don't want to spoil anything that happens in this book because it's very interesting. But here's a brief summary on what this book's about. Solaris is a haunting and cerebral voyage into the unknowable, a masterpiece of philosophical science fiction that examines what happens when human consciousness collides with a truly alien intelligence. Set aboard a decaying space station orbiting a sentient planet, Solaris, the story follows psychologist Chris Kelvin as he confronts inexplicable phenomenon, manifestations drawn from the darkest corners of his mind. The planet, covered by a vast, mysterious ocean, seems to probe the minds of the crew, not with malice, but with a form of incomprehensible empathy or indifference. As Kelvin wrestles with memory, guilt, and love, Solaris becomes not a tale of conquest or discovery, but a profound meditation on the limits of communication, the burden of the human psyche, and the futility of trying to understand that which does not share our nature. Mysterious, melancholic, and richly layered, Solaris is as much a psychological ghost story as it is a cosmic enigma. So yeah, I hope that summary pushes you guys to go and pick up this book. It's not too expensive. I think I paid $20 for this paperback. There's a brilliant free audiobook in English online on YouTube. You guys can go check it out. It's a fantastic reading. The narrator is very engaging, and I think he did a great job of reading it. So go check it out. I'll put it up on screen right now, and I'll also put up on screen some of the other major works from Lem if you guys are interested. As I said before, I haven't read any of these titles that are on screen right now, but I will eventually get around to reading at least probably most of them. I might eventually read all of them. I really like Lem's writing. I have so many books on my wish list. It just depends on when I get around to them. But if you are a big Lem fan, like I said before, definitely let me know down below in the comments, what should I read next? Because I definitely want to get deeper into this man's writings. So next, I'm going to provide you guys with 5 science fiction books that I think are great to branch off to after you've read Solaris. The first is Roadside Picnic by Arkady and Boris Strugatsky. And Roadside Picnic is probably the most similar book to Solaris. It's very similar ideas with the zone, and I don't want to spoil Roadside Picnic for you guys either. I will make a why you should read video on Roadside Picnic soon, because I reread Solaris and Roadside Picnic just a few months ago, and it motivated me to make this video. And like I said, I'll make one on Roadside Picnic too. But both of those works, Solaris and Roadside Picnic, were eventually adapted into 2 of my favorite films of all time. Like I said, I'll talk about them in a second here, but Roadside Picnic, if you want a book that's similar to Solaris, that's the next one you should pick up. After that, I would highly recommend 2001: A Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke. It's a very, very interesting book. As a lot of you guys have probably seen the movie, but there's a lot of people who neglect the book, who don't actually read the book. The book was created kind of in conjunction with the film. Arthur C. Clarke and Stanley Kubrick were kind of in dialogue as both were being created. So very interesting to read the book as well. Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer, fantastic science fiction book. A little bit newer too, Arthur C. Clarke, Stanisław Lem, these are kind of older science fiction writers. Jeff Vandermeer is more of a contemporary writer, and I think Annihilation and the whole series, I haven't read the whole series yet, but the whole series is supposed to be fantastic. I think there's 4 books in the Annihilation series, Annihilation being the first book, and the film is one of the most underrated films of all time. I truly think it's one of the deepest science fiction films I've ever seen in my life. I feel like people walked out of the theater confused and didn't really understand what it was about. I know I did. It took me years to understand what Annihilation was about, but I feel like if you come back to that film, you'll realize that it truly is a sci-fi masterpiece on the level of 2001, The Matrix, Inception. I think it's up there with those films. Now, it has a 6.8 rating or something like that on IMDb. I think that's criminal. And yeah, I would highly recommend the book and the film Annihilation. I would also recommend Ubik by Philip K. Dick. Many people have engaged with Blade Runner, and maybe you've read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, the work that Blade Runner is based off of, but Philip K. Dick is he's on the Mount Rushmore when it comes to science fiction writers. It's like him, Asimov. There's not too many science fiction writers who have written that many masterpieces in the genre as Philip K. Dick. So Ubik is another one that I would recommend by Philip K. Dick. I could argue that that's maybe his best work. I actually like it a little bit more than Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. So Ubik by Philip K. Dick is another one that I highly recommend. And lastly, I'll recommend Ursula K. Le Guin, her book, The Left Hand of Darkness. I haven't finished it yet. I'm still working through it myself, but The Left Hand of Darkness is brilliant, and it's one of those science fiction books that usually pop up on the most essential science fiction books of all time. It's a masterclass of science fiction writing, and I'm thoroughly enjoying my reading of it currently. So those are 5 books that I think are very similar to Solaris if you want more kind of abstract, cosmic, horror, sci-fi type of novels. So we'll move on to some films now. So I'm going to recommend 4 films. However, I'm only really going to recommend 3. Only 3 of these 4 films do I actually think you should go and watch, but I'm recommending a 4th because I know there are some people out there that don't really like watching films with subtitles, or they don't like films that are too slow and long and drawn out. They like things that are a little bit faster. So I will recommend both adaptations of Solaris, even though I think one is clearly superior to the other. I think 1972 Solaris, directed by Andrei Tarkovsky, is truly one of the greatest science fiction films of all time. I think it's on par with 2001: A Space Odyssey. I could even make an argument that it's a greater film than 2001: A Space Odyssey because it's more personal. It gets a little bit deeper to the human soul, whereas 2001: A Space Odyssey can feel a little indifferent or or separated from humanity at times. It loses its human element at points throughout the film. So Solaris is very grounded in the human experience. And even Tarkovsky kind of criticized his own film, saying, I made that one a little bit too personal. I made it a little bit too sentimental. I should have been a little bit more sci-fi-y with it and a little bit more like the novel. In fact, Stanisław Lem doesn't actually like Solaris from 1972. He didn't think that it was an accurate adaptation. However, I would argue, and I'm sure many people would argue, that Tarkovsky took this work and he pushed it even further than Lem did in the adaptation from 1972. I truly think that's one of the greatest films of all time, let alone science fiction films of all time. It's free on YouTube. You have no excuse not to watch it. Moss Films is one of the greatest YouTube channels on earth. They post free Russian films with no interruptions. You don't have like ad breaks throughout it. The logo is very, very small in the little corner. You can barely notice it. They're translated into English. I think they have some of the films translated into Spanish as well. And I love Moss Films. They're an incredible database on YouTube if you want to get into Russian films. And Solaris is on YouTube for free in high definition with English subtitles. So please go watch 1972 Solaris. It's a much superior film to the 2002 remake with George Clooney, and I'm going to recommend that film because I know some people will find it a little bit more engaging than Tarkovsky, because Tarkovsky, I always say this, Tarkovsky's closer to William Blake. He's closer to poetry than he is to like a Marvel film or traditional movies, action films or stuff like that. Tarkovsky takes his time. He'll let you sit in a shot for a very long time and examine everything on screen and feel the moment. He'll let you think your way through scenes instead of skipping on to the next one. So Tarkovsky is literally poetry in motion on screen. He's the most poetic cinematographer and director I've ever come across in all of my engagement with cinema. So I highly recommend the 1972 version, but if you want something that's a little bit more accessible, a little bit more modern, a little bit quicker in how it tells the story, 2002 is a little bit more accessible, I will say. But the next film that I would recommend is 1979's Stalker, so also by Andrei Tarkovsky, and it's in my top 5 favorite films of all time. It's very high up there for me. It's a film that I meditate on quite often. I rewatch it very often. I just rewatched it the other day, actually. I still don't understand the ending. I don't understand why the glasses are moving. I don't want to spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen it, but Stalker is it's an adaptation of Roadside Picnic, but also you can argue, just like with Solaris from 1972, that he actually took the original novel and pushed it further. And I would definitely argue that with Stalker. Solaris, I still love the book a lot. Roadside Picnic, I like Solaris a little bit more than Roadside Picnic, but Stalker really takes Roadside Picnic and pushes it into the stratosphere and makes it something much more than what the novel is. I could talk about Tarkovsky all day because he created 7 films in his lifetime, and all 7 of them are 10 out of 10 masterpieces. I can't say that for any other director. No other director I've ever come across has every single film is perfect. Like Sergio Leone's close, but even he has like a weak film. Tarkovsky doesn't have one. Every single film is a 10 out of 10 masterpiece. And Solaris and Stalker and I think almost all of his films are free on YouTube. I would highly recommend pairing Stalker with Solaris. They're a great double feature. Both of them kind of dive into, abstract cosmic horror, sci-fi elements. They're very, very complicated, deep films, and they take many watches to understand. So I would pair them together. You will be sitting in front of your TV for over 5 hours if you do that. They're both, I think, at least 2.5 hour long films. But man, I can't stress it enough. Both of those films to me are so deep and have moved me so much. I love both of those films. And the last film that I'll mention today is it's a newer film. It came out in 2016, and it's very similar to Solaris. It tells a similar story and how it gets abstract with what we can know and what we can't know, interacting with an alien intelligence that's truly alien, not just, green men on a ship that kind of look humanoid, like Star Trek. Every single episode of Star Trek, all the aliens are humanoids and speak English, and it's like, are we ever going to encounter an alien that's really truly different? I know Next Generation does at times, and even the original series does at times, but I love when a science fiction story will engage with a truly alien intelligence, like something that's very different from humanity. And Arrival from 2016 also does that expertly. And I think Denis Villeneuve is probably the second greatest director working today. It's hard to say because Scorsese's still technically active and whatnot. But out of like the modern directors working today, I think Chris Nolan is obviously our generation's GOAT. He's I think he's put himself far and away as the greatest director working today. But I think second to him, right underneath him, is Denis Villeneuve. And I love Denis. He's representing strong for Canada. Before him, we only had really David Cronenberg, and now we have Denis, one of the greatest film directors on the face of the planet, and he's Canadian, representing strong for the North. So yeah, absolutely love Solaris. I highly recommend you go and check this out. Like I said, the free audiobook on YouTube is fantastic, a very great reading of it. But if you want to go pick up the physical copy, like I said, it runs you about $20 Canadian on Amazon, and just read it, man. It'll burrow itself into your mind, and you won't stop thinking about it for the rest of your life. I can almost guarantee that. It's a deeply, deeply moving piece of fiction. And yeah, that's all that I have to say today about it. So if you guys have any suggestions on books that you want to see covered in this series next, definitely let me know down below in the comments. And yeah, don't forget to like, subscribe, share with your friends to help boost this channel and the algorithm. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, it means the world to me. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.